Are you aware of allegations that $50,000 in taxpayer dollars have been given to someone that is currently sitting in this administration by the name of Tom Homan? Are you aware? Okay, that's a yes.
I am.
Okay, and last I checked, and correct me if I'm wrong if you have different information, but he was given that $50,000 in exchange for being able to provide contracts and kickbacks to people as soon as Trump was going to get into office. The DOJ was actually investigating this, but as soon as Trump got into office, last I checked, he actually said, go ahead and throw away that case.
So it was a Department of Justice investigation, and he accepted the money from an undercover FBI agent in cash.
Are you aware as to whether or not we ever got that $50,000 back?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Are you aware as to whether or not this committee has decided to investigate that?
I'm not.
Are you aware as to whether or not any committee in Congress has decided to investigate the fact that we know that he took $50,000 from an undercover officer, and yet we still don't have that money, nor does he have any charges?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's get into it. We're living through the
What no one on that committee wanted to openly address was finally brought into the spotlight. Republicans had called the hearing with a clear agenda to target Somali immigrants and, in front of cameras, paint an entire community as suspicious. But then Jasmine Crockett stepped in and completely shifted the tone in a way no one saw coming. She started with one simple, direct question. Do you believe all Somalis are involved in fraud? One by one, every witness answered the same way. No. Because deep down, they knew that wasn't the truth. And that's when everything changed. The narrative began to crack. It became clear this wasn't really about fraud at all. It was about fear, about making everyday working-class Americans suspicious of their own neighbors, so they wouldn't notice what's actually being taken from them behind the scenes. Then she did something even more powerful. She started reading out a list. And what came next wasn't just surprising, it was shocking enough to leave the entire room in silence.
I think this question has been posed for each of you, and we can start at the far end. Do you believe that all Somalis are engaged in fraud?
I do not, and I'd like to...
Okay, just yes or no. Next.
Of course not.
Oh, absolutely not. We have good Somali people in our state.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to make sure I level set, because it seems like we want to continue to, especially as we just heard those particular articles entered into the record, we want to continue to just make it seem as if you are Somali, then somehow you are a fraudster. And this administration has decided that it wants a target on their backs. And so when my colleague, Ms. Randall, decided that she wanted to talk about the threats that are being made towards various Somali people, the reason she brought it up is because this particular side of the aisle has a tendency of, if one person does something bad, especially if they are an immigrant, then we are going to cast aside that entire community. So I wanted to level set, and I appreciate your honesty, because that's something that we very rarely get from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. In fact, if we want to talk about fraud, I got a lot of fraud that we're going to talk about, because we're going to get into this, but I am very curious to hear. Let me ask you, Mr. Ballou, are you aware of allegations that $50,000 in taxpayer dollars have been given to someone that is currently sitting in this administration by the name of Tom Homan? Are you aware? Okay, that's a yes.
I am.
Okay, and last I checked, and correct me if I'm wrong if you have different information, but he was given that $50,000 in exchange for being able to provide contracts and kickbacks to people as soon as Trump was going to get into office. The DOJ was actually investigating this, but as soon as Trump got into office, last I checked, he actually said, go ahead and throw away that case.
So it was a Department of Justice investigation, and he accepted the money from an undercover FBI agent in cash.
Are you aware as to whether or not we ever got that $50,000 back?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Are you aware as to whether or not this committee has decided to investigate that?
I'm not.
Are you aware as to whether or not any committee in Congress has decided to investigate the fact that we know that he took $50,000 from an undercover officer, and yet we still don't have that money, nor does he have any charges?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's get into it. We're living through the most corrupt presidential administration in American history, a $300 million ballroom, a $230 million payout from the Department of Justice because the president got his feelings hurt because he had to be investigated for being a criminal. Hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars spent at Trump-owned properties around the country, Trump-branded wine being sold at the Coast Guard exchanges, American taxpayer dollars being spent on DHS propaganda ads on Truth Social, awarding federal contracts to corporations in exchange for campaign contributions. Kash Patel flew his girlfriend around the country on a multi-million-dollar jet that taxpayers paid for. Kristi Noem gave companies she's affiliated with hundreds of millions of tax dollars, then went out and spent another $200 million on 2 private jets for her travel. For 12 months, this administration has been taking billions of taxpayer dollars from American people and have been giving it away to their own companies in the form of tax cuts, government contracts, or other government-funded subsidies. So Congress has a role in getting rid of fraud, I will admit that, in any federally funded government program. However, I think the fraud that the American people are concerned about is that the Republicans are taking away Americans' health care so that ultra-billionaires can get more tax cuts. The real fraud is the dehumanization and demonization of the working-class Americans and immigrants to distract folks away from corporate socialism that's happening because of the Republicans. So this is truly the definition of throwing away the baby with the bathwater. The Republican philosophy is that if the cost of living for the average American increases, they're on their own. But if the cost of doing business increases for the wealthiest people on earth, well, then it's the government job to bail them out. But I want to get to my last question because, Mr. Ballou, I got to give you a chance. He's been issuing pardons for numerous people who have defrauded the American people. And Republicans on this committee, yeah, just as quiet as the room just got, right? So, Mr. Ballou, talk to me about how the Trump administration has welcomed fraud across government by purging DOJ attorneys and shuttering ethics office across the federal government.
Well, you know, one of the things that's been a common theme in this discussion so far is potential government employee involvement in some of these schemes. That hasn't been proven yet, but it does seem to be alleged. The concern that I have is the office that would prosecute that in the Department of Justice, the Public Integrity Section, has been largely defunded and decimated.
Thank you so much. And my time has expired, but I do have some UC.
A $300 million ballroom, a $230 million payout from the Department of Justice because the president got upset over being investigated for his own alleged crimes. Hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars spent at Trump-owned properties, Trump-branded wine sold at Coast Guard exchanges, cash. Patel flying his girlfriend across the country on a multi-million-dollar jet, all funded by taxpayers. Kristi Noem awarding companies she's personally tied to with hundreds of millions in public funds, then spending another $200 million on private jets for her own travel in just 12 months. Tom Homan accepting $50,000 in cash from an undercover FBI agent as a bribe and still walking into the White House while the DOJ quietly dropped its investigation. That is the real list. That is the actual fraud. And yet, not a single committee in Congress has launched an investigation into any of it. But somehow, they found time to hold a hearing on Somali immigrants. That's exactly what Jasmine Crockett called out. It's the oldest trick in the book. Find a community that looks different, make them the face of every problem, and keep working-class Americans angry at their neighbors. While everyone's looking left, the people in power are robbing them blind from the right. She summed it up perfectly. The Republican philosophy is simple. If the cost of living rises for the average American, you're on your own. But if the cost of doing business rises for the wealthiest people on earth, suddenly it becomes the government's job to bail them out. And the room went completely silent when she mentioned the pardons, people who defrauded the American public, yet were being let off without consequence.